Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 20 of the 40-day global study of Maimonides project in honor and memory of my father, Jack Abramson. So we are making our way through this glorious fourth chapter of Maimonides' Laws of Teshuvah, the ways of repentance. And in this chapter, we've gone through a whole bunch of different categories of impediments to Teshuvah, things that can hold us back from repentance. And we go from more crude and obvious to the finer and the more subtle. So now we're towards the end of the chapter, and check this law 4 out. And there are 5 things that we assume a person cannot normally rectify through tshuva, because they are things that most people do not take seriously, and people sin without realizing it. These are they. 1. One who eats as a guest at the table of a host who cannot afford the meal. This is a minor form of theft. The guest feels that it is no sin, saying, hey, I didn't eat anything without the permission of the host. Right? The idea is that here, obviously, the host is too poor to really provide for the guest. And the guest said, look, he said that I'm invited and I can have whatever I want and so on. So, I once taught this class and someone was asking me, so what are you supposed to do? And it was a good question, because what are you supposed to do if someone who's obviously very poor, offers you a meal and, you feel terrible taking food from them when you see that they're barely putting things on the table for themselves and for their family? So it occurred to me maybe one of the ways to do this is if you can't feign that you're not hungry, or you can't just take a token amount to indicate that you're not insulting them in any way, perhaps you can find another way to make it up to them. Maybe you can bring them a gift of food for the next time you're over there, or bring something that compensates them at least. I mean, that was one thought towards it. I'm sure you'll have many others. But nevertheless, it's a kind of theft, certainly, to say, hey, he said I could have it, so I'm going to have it, right? You have to think twice, even though someone says you can have it. Number 2, one who uses the collateral of a poor person, such as a shovel or a plow, deposited to secure a loan, saying, I didn't take anything away from the pledge, I did not steal anything at all. So this is interesting, because here, the poor person is depositing, let's say, the shovel with you, saying, look, I need to borrow money, here's my shovel as collateral for the loan. So if you dig a hole with the shovel, you may be damaging it ever so slightly, maybe scraping some of the paint off, or wearing down the handle a little bit, but it's such a tiny amount, it's almost impossible to measure how you might change it. You might say, hey, I didn't change it at all. But nevertheless, even this tiny amount of usage, not only is it offensive because you've done it without permission, but you've also taken away a tiny amount from that person. 3, one who ogles a woman, thinking to himself that this means nothing. He says, did I have relations with this woman, or even draw close to her? He does not realize that what the eye sees can be a great sin, since it may lead to inappropriate relations, as is written in Numbers, do not seek after your heart. Right? There's a whole idea there about seeking after your eyes, after your heart, and so on. But what's fascinating here is you notice that the halachos, they go in increasing order of subtlety even within this section, because the first section, you actually did take food from the poor person. He offered it to you and you took it, but you actually did cause him a loss. In the second level with the shovel, you caused him a loss, but it was so tiny. There was nothing in it at all. How do you measure that a chip of paint comes off off the end of the shovel? In the third level, you certainly didn't take anything away from the woman in terms of monetary value, but you made her feel uncomfortable. You ogled her in such a way that you violated her privacy, and this represents also a kind of theft. And this is an impediment to tshuva, to think that you can just get away with these things blithely and it doesn't really matter. That is an impediment to tshuva. Okay, number 4, one who honors oneself through the downfall of another. Hamitchabed beklon chavero in Hebrew. Saying that is no sin because the other person is not present and will not hear and be embarrassed. Instead, one merely praises one's own good deeds and intelligence in contrast to the deeds and intelligence of the other person, with the intent that people should notice who deserves honor and who deserves disdain. So this is an interesting halacha as well, in that we're not talking about here about slandering someone behind their back. We're talking about praising yourself in such a way that you invite comparison with others. And doing that, what did you take away from that other person? You didn't actually mention their name. You didn't even allude to them. You just allowed people to think less well of them compared to yourself. So again, even more fine a point than ogling a woman. It's like you've taken something away without taking something material away. It's an impediment to Teshuvah to think that you can get away with these things. Number 5, and the final one, and this is very subtle, one who suspects the innocent, saying that this is no sin. What did I do to him? Did I do anything other than suspect him? Perhaps he did something wrong, perhaps he did not. One does not realize that it's a great sin to consider a decent person to be a sinner. So this is fascinating because you didn't even let anyone else know that you were thinking this person is guilty of doing something wrong. But nevertheless, the fact that you're suspecting them, again, there are parameters to what is an appropriate suspicion and so on, too much for us to go into today. But the idea is that just suspecting someone and doing this on a habitual level, thinking it means nothing, that's something you have to deal with because it's blocking your path to real repentance. Okay? And it's interesting, you look at these, you see how the Rambam is clearly moving in a direction from greater crudity to greater subtlety. Okay, that's it for today. We have the conclusion of the chapters tomorrow. It's an amazing chapter. This is probably my favorite chapter. Well, one of my favorite chapters in the book. Okay, thank you very much for listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.